You're my first one. Yeah, I had a really good show planned for tonight. My typical, average, usual Friday show I do every Friday at 7. Yes, tonight I was going to discuss in a lot more detail all the aspects of various illusions that exist. If you've watched my past lives, then you already understand well enough that the concepts that I'm about to discuss are very real. I'm not just postulating these things, these are established facts, okay? Here's the thing, there are two competing uh, syndicates of elites with very different goals from each other. You do have the Western banking satanic elites whose goal is to do this great reset. But then on the other hand, you have the Eastern elites, which, although like rival mafia families sitting down to have business dealings, which is as true in the criminal realm as it is on the world stage, you have these Eastern elites like the CCP in China and the Russian political oligarchy class and others and others. And India is a very interesting case as it pertains to that. And I'm going to get to that in a little bit. But right now, in order for people to understand where I'm going with this, you must understand that there are two sets of elites with very different radical objectives and goals. Okay? Now, the CCP only cares about the CCP. The CCP could give a rat's ass about the Western elites and what they want. But they do occasionally come together to do business, like rival mafia families even do, or to collaborate on overarching goals. And while they're actually collaborating, they're also stabbing the West in the back. And there's many recorded instances of this, which I've told you in my live stream, The End of the West, Not the World, that live stream. I went into very, very deep depths with how the Chinese do things and also how the Russians do things and how it's very, very much of a different mindset than what the Western elites have in mind for their own goals and objectives. Now, you see, you must understand the Western elites, to have their great reset, they need to tear everything down so they can do what? So they can build back better, which is an elitist slogan of the Western satanic elites. They want to tear down the whole entire world, and what they thought that the Eastern elites would somehow go along with that and do it themselves. But the Eastern elites actually played the West and only paid lip service to their ideas because the Eastern elites were needed to cooperate to even have a one world system. But the Western elites wanted it to be a Western-led one world system. But the Chi-Coms and the Russians have different ideas, and that's manifesting in our world right in front of everybody, and it's undeniable. It's undeniable. Okay. So the CCP wasn't officially invited to the summit that they held in Davos, but like I told you in the other stream, they sent one of their agents in. And who was that? Why, that was the president of Alibaba, a Chi-Com equivalent of what's it called? Amazon. I'm sorry, I almost slipped my mind there. Amazon. That is the Chi-Com Amazon, okay? Now, to even become somebody in China, you must pledge your allegiance to the CCP. And they are a secular humanist, secular humanist, despotic police state regime. I almost lost my train of thought there. I'm sorry. I have a lot to talk about, and it's sort of overwhelming because I have so much to go over, and I need to cover it all before my phone dies. I made sure the phone was fully charged. But anyways, yes, so you have that going on. And what did he do? Well, he went in there and he paid lip service to the Western elites, saying that, keep doing your green energy stuff. Does China do green energy? No, it does not do green energy. China is full of smog because its factories run 24/7. They are not party to the Western elitist objectives. China is building itself up while the West is tearing itself down. Same with Russia. Now, you all saw my community post where I explicitly and elaborately gave you analysis on why China is not broke, why the Evergrande thing is not a big deal to them like it is to the West, because it's only hurting the West, like how they shut down their ports to Western trade. Shanghai is their primary port for trade with the West. And what did they do? They made up some bullshit story about a certain thing, and they shut it down so that they could hurt us, because we depend on them for trade. We depend on China for finished goods, pharmaceuticals, components, electronic components, and more. And you know, other types of materials and goods. We even parts for goods. And when China shut that down, guess what? All that stuff ain't coming in. It's not coming in. And our supply chain is already extended to the max. Now, you have to understand, it might seem as if, you know, the Western elites are getting their way, but they even said in Davos that their plans are not going according to plan for their great reset. But why is that? Because the Eastern elites don't want to cooperate with them. And because their plans for Russia have failed. Russia is all about Russia. They are not about no great reset. Now, Putin, being the KGB man, the spy by trade, by craft that he is, infiltrated the WEF to find out what they were all about, to use it against them, just like the Chinese do. You have to understand that about the Eastern, Chinese, and Russian mindsets. They are about playing the long game, where they actually strategically map out all their future moves every bit as much as the Western elites do, only their goals are about their nations building up, and they've said as much in their decrees of a multipolar world. But the multipolar world Russia and China are talking about is a multipolar world in which the West is vanquished and gone because China, out of their own mouths, talks about colonizing the United States, which is the main power base of the Western elites. Because all that can mean then is that the West is their rivals. You've seen their propaganda. I mean, yes, it's back in vogue again because they're against the West and they're getting ready to go to war with the West. So they're resurrecting some of the old Korean War propaganda again. And I'm sure that they've got newer propaganda out now. Now, speaking of propaganda, depending on where you live in the world is the type of news and information you'll be privy to, okay? So when you live in the West, and even if you're a Western truther, guess what? Your views tend to be skewed or biased towards sort of a Western slant, a Western way of thinking. But you can't let any sort of a bias get in your way because you have to understand how other parts of the world think and perceive things to get the real full picture. Now, you have to understand, if you live in China, you're going to be bombarded by CCP regime propaganda. If you live in Russia, guess what? You'll be inundated with pro-Russian propaganda. Now, if you're in the West and you're a truther in the West, or you claim to be a truther, you're going to be looking only at half of it, which is what the Western elites are doing, while you're ignoring what the Eastern elites are doing because your perceptions are off, because you're not understanding that they are two separate rival sects, two separate rival clans, two separate rival syndicates. And they have bifurcated because they've concluded their business with one another, and now they're preparing for a third world war. Well, if you believe in the Bible, you know there's 10 kings. And these 10 kings rule 10 nations or regions even. China and Russia being two of the 10 kings. Of that is an established fact because those are two of the biggest nations in the end times. Why? Because they're the nations that lead the coalition to destroy Mystery Babylon and colonize it and pillage it and plunder it. Just like I read Jeremiah to you, and as I went, I related all that stuff to modern terms, because remember, the Bible is an ancient book, so when it's talking about the future, you have to relate it in modern terms, and I think I did that really well for everybody. They didn't have a word back then, or a way of explaining what hybrid warfare was. So, but what the prophecy says in the book about Mystery Babylon, basically, essentially, describes hybrid warfare to the letter, about all sides, in and out, being attacked, plundered, destroyed. And you know what? They were right on the mark with that. They were right on the money with that. I love Bible prophecy, but what I do as an amateur researcher and analyst, God has me to dig up facts so that I can back up prophecy with physical facts, because that is my kingdom work. That's my basically what God bestowed upon me to do, is to be a researcher, find facts that back up prophecy. And I think I've done that quite well. Now, there will be a third world war. Mystery Babylon USA will be destroyed by China and Russia and their allies, and we will be colonized, and there will be a conflict of occupation and genocide that will happen. It's just part of making the land desolate. It says that Mystery Babylon will become desperate. They'll be desperate too, but they'll be desolate, because they're going to be occupied, and there's going to be foreign armies trying to butcher or enslave all the people. And I'm trying to help everybody navigate that. That is the purpose of my kingdom work. That is the purpose of my entire channel. The basis of my channel is I am a tough love channel. I am a hardline Christian as far as traditional values, as far as accepting the entire Bible and not cherry-picking verses, understanding the full context of the Bible, and understanding that self-defense is a very righteous thing, as is preparedness, as there's many examples of both throughout the Bible. I am a man that is needed in these times to get the Christian people, the true Christian people, to accept that it's time to toughen up. It's time to forget about all the, candy and Skittles. It's time to get tough. It's not time for being soft right now. It's time to be hardcore, because, the realities we face are very bleak. I'm a combat veteran of the Iraq War, and I could tell you a lot about what I did in that conflict, but I'm not going to go there because it brings up really horrible memories. But I'm just going to say this much, is that I don't want that to come here. I do not want that to come here, but I know it's going to come here, and it's going to be about 50 times worse as far as the level of intensity. What I experienced in Iraq is going to come here, and it's going to be 50 times worse in intensity, meaning the amount of things that are going on and the intensity level of those things going on is going to be 50 times worse than what I experienced in Iraq. And that's all I'm going to say about that. So going back to what I was saying about the two rival syndicates of elites, now you have one wanting to tear its own power base apart, which is the Western elites, so that they can rebuild their system as the Great Reset. But that's going to fail, and I've explained to you diligently why that's going to fail, and I've supported that with many facts, okay? China and Russia infiltrated our institutions and used them against us to achieve their own goals of weakening us for an invasion, okay? You got to understand that. Look, the Western elites want to weaken us so that they can create their Great Reset in the West, while the Eastern elites want to help to weaken us so that they can make us easier to conquer. But here's the deal. When you look at everything that's going on right now through the lens of everything I just told you, it helps to make things a bit more clear as far as the news and information that people are getting, all these current events narratives that are pilfering through the alternative media, because people are just reading articles and they're not going and double checking with statistics, numbers, facts, figures, capabilities, all that, all the above. They're not looking deeper into these things. People think things are cut and dry when they're not. Things are not cut and dry. You have many different types of people, entities, and groups doing many different things. Now, in terms of like all the firearms stuff that's going on right now, listen, I'm going to explain to you right now how armies work. How armies work, because this is very important for what I'm going to tell you right after. Armies depend on logistics to function. Logistics and personnel. And the personnel have to be trained up to standard. They have to know what they're doing, and they have to be sizable enough to tackle a mission, and they have to have the parts, the fuel, and when I say parts, I mean parts for vehicles, weapons, components, everything. They have to have all that stuff, and they have to have a lot of it, and ammunition. They have to have food. Now, in the context of that, our army is depleted. It's woke. It's sending its gear overseas, weapons and gear that it needs, sending it all overseas. It's weakening itself. It's depleted. Its piss poor leadership is running it into the ground. But that's deliberate, of course. But they're doing it for different reasons than what the East wants it to be done for, which is to weaken us. Now, I've told you all about what Russia's doing in Ukraine, about how it's a big distraction to get us to deploy troops over there, to split our forces into small pockets to be annihilated by their much bigger forces, by China's vast, gargantuan, ginormous forces that I've told you about many, many times. I don't think I really need to explain it right now. Maybe I will a little later for a review if there's any new people here. But as of right now, they want to split our military into small pockets, destroy it overseas, and they're going to open up little theaters to do it. Ukraine is one, but they're going to do more. That's not the end of it. And I've told you this. If you guys have stuck with me for 2 years, and I know some of you on here have, I've been consistent with my messaging. Have I not? Have I not been steady, consistently telling you the same things over and over? Because people learn by repetition, because I'm an educator, and that is my entire mission, is to educate people. And when I say mission, I mean that by, my God-given task is to educate people and to help shatter narratives, to get people to see things in the proper perspective. So when you think about how armies work, how they need massive logistics, and you think about how the supply chain's screwed up and how it's hampering logistics, when you think about all the stuff that's going on in Ukraine, all our stuff being sent there and destroyed, which it is, most of it's destroyed, and the rest of it either gets sold on the black market or the very little bit of it that gets to the people it was intended for only works half of the time. So it's futile. It's futile. They're sending them stuff with power packs that aren't even fully charged. I mean, come on. They're only sending them a couple different things here and there at a time, and they're big ticket items, and they get wiped out as soon as they get there. I mean, this is ridiculous. Well, all it's doing is weakening us and our forces. But inadvertently, what they're actually doing is they're setting this place up at the same time for an internal Syrian-style conflict. By perpetrating these false flag things that they're doing everywhere, all the time now, what they're trying to do is, because they know their military's woke, green, inexperienced, and it is, because it's a whole new generation. They purged all the good people. So we have a bunch of new, green, inexperienced, woke troops, or this Call of Duty generation, or these armchair, warriors that joined up because the standards are so low now that they could get in, because recruiting's horrible, because nobody wants to go into a force that's making them do CRT and woke stuff and celebrating certain things and forcing people to get a certain thing in the arm. I mean, people aren't going to join a force like that. It's a weakened, demoralized, woke, pathetic force, which is led by piss-poor leaders that are running it into the ground, and it's increasingly depleted. Well, Chad, how does that figure into things? Well, let me tell you how it figures into things. Okay, so they're talking all this shit about coming after people's firearms, but deep down they know that they can't do it. They cannot do it. They cannot enforce it. They're not strong enough. You have to understand, China and Russia are strong enough to conquer this land and do it easily, because they have the numbers, they have the technology, they have the people. I mean, they have everything they need. They have the massive stockpile of munitions that they can use to fight this place to kingdom come, as far as a counterinsurgency once they've taken over. So here's the deal. Our military, being only 2.2 million people that's spread across the globe, that's increasingly depleted, it's woke, it's pathetic, it's demoralized, it's basically rotten to the core. It doesn't have the logistics due to the supply chain being hampered. Our industries have suffered, and that includes our military industrial complex that can't replace stuff that's being destroyed overseas. that's being shipped overseas that we really need here at home. But the thing is, if they were to give them a mission to where they would tell them, hey, you have to start trying to, disarm people, that would never work. They're not big enough, for one thing. They're not big enough. They don't have the personnel. I told you just to run a checkpoint how many people it requires, and that they've already tried it, and that they've beta tested it, and they've realized it was ineffective because nobody even really remembered it. I barely remembered it my damn self. They tried to run checkpoints on the state line of Montana and Idaho, and also on the state line of New Mexico and Arizona, and nobody remembers it. Do you know why? Because America has 4 million miles of roads to cover. 4 million miles of roads. And 2.2 million, and that's everything. That's the active, the guard, the reserves. 2.2 million for 4 million miles of roads, and it takes about a battalion to run a really effective, large checkpoint. So really, they just don't have the numbers being spread out around the world and everything else to run checkpoints or to occupy large swathes of territory, especially when they're poorly trained, and you have all the best trained people out of the military that were guys like me or other guys that were in during the Iraq and Afghanistan conflicts. Those are the cream of the crop people, and they're all out of the military by now. So now this new, green, inexperienced generation that doesn't know what the hell they're doing, that barely trains, there's barely enough ammunition for training. And that's a fact. That's been an established fact that they do not have enough training ammo for certain systems. So that's because of the supply chains being hampered. It affects the military-industrial complex. They're also sending stuff overseas that they vitally need for their missions to defend the country, if that was their mission, but they're going to use them in ways that are going to get people riled up. And when I do my internal Syrian-style conflict documentary, I'm literally going to break it down to every single solitary aspect of it, including logistics, including tactics, including the types of people that comprise these elements, including the level of training and experience they have, including the types of equipment they have, and how well maintained it is or not maintained. And in most cases, they can barely use certain things because they don't have the parts, they don't have the fuel. Selling the fuel, the emergency fuel for the strategic reserve to Europe and also to China and India is going to hamper military operations, especially considering that they want to do this whole green energy thing, which is part of their Great Reset plan. But let me tell you something. You cannot run tanks off of freaking solar panels. Really, come on now. You're not going to run armaments factories off of solar panels or windmills. Come on, man. Oh, I said it. I just said it. Like, what's his name? Come on, man. No, but really, all seriousness, the military situation is pathetic. And part of that is because the Western elites shot themselves in the foot, but part of it's also because the Eastern elites paid them to do it. You have to understand, these political parasites, it doesn't matter what party they're in, the left-right paradigm is fake. People want to call out, oh, the Democrats are doing this or the Republicans. No, they're all the same. They all serve the same master. When are people going to understand that? They worship mammon, money. They serve mammon. Mammon. That's money. That's wealth. That's all they're all about. They're total whores. They're whores for money. So if China lines their pockets, that's who they do the bidding of. I told you before in another live that the United States, by legal definition, is a fascist republic. By fascist, it means corporatism, where government and big government, big corporations are in bed together, and republic is representative government. But the only people that are getting representation are the people that can pay to play. It's a pay-to-play fascist republic. And even foreign interests are represented before the interests of the American people, who are tax chattel, just there to be fleeced. But here's the deal. What they're doing is they're inadvertently setting themselves up for failure, and it will backfire on them. And I'm going to diligently explain that to you, okay? I just explained to you how shoddy and horrible the military situation is. It's not much better in other parts of the regime. Other parts of the regime are suffering the same types of issues. Well, just today I was talking to my lovely Jennifer. She's a sweetheart. I love her, and she's beautiful, and she's just everything to me. But I was talking to her, and she sent me an article, which I've seen quite a lot of this lately. It was an article about police departments not being able to run because they can't fuel up their cruisers. See? This is the shit I'm talking about, everybody. All right? This is going to affect the military, the police, the security forces, the paramilitary, like the alphabet gangs. It's going to affect everything. Stuff is not going to run in this nation. And then you're going to have a situation like Syria, where there's a bunch of rioting, and in the background, while the rioting's going on, you're going to see all kinds of people come out of the woodwork, people I call free radicals, and I know that's a chemistry term. What a free radical is in chemistry is it's an atom with an unpaired electron that is seeking stability by trying to bind with another atom. Well, free radicals could be literal radicals that are hidden, embedded among the population that have ideas of their own about how they want to change America. And they have no affiliations with the regime or anybody in the regime or anybody in the bankster gangster community that runs the regime, like the Western elites. No, free radicals are wild cards, and those are going to be the people that turn into factions like in Syria. And that's why it's all going to backfire. There are more guns in this nation than there are people. And the woke military is not big enough, it's not strong enough, it's not trained enough, it's not logistically capable enough of handling such a large-scale operation as a disarmament, tongue twister, a disarmament campaign. I'm sorry, y'all, I have a head injury, so from time to time I sort of slur or, I have stuttering occasionally, but forgive me for that, But anyways, I was saying that, the woke military is not anything like it used to be. When I was in, it wasn't woke. It was a professional military. The level of professionalism we had, I mean, even if we were a little bit depleted from fighting counterinsurgencies for about 20 years or so, by the time I got out, it was 10 years. Even by that time, though, we were still a professional enough force that our professionalism rivaled our enemies like China and Russia. But about 2017, 2018, that was the nexus point when our enemies were ascending to power and we were descending from power. That was when China and Russia and us were basically all on about the same level. And then China shot ahead and became the world superpower and massively, rapidly, uber industrialized. They were already pretty industrialized once the 90s, once they had stolen enough trade secrets and infiltrated enough of and subverted enough of our institutions and gotten what they needed from us to build themselves up. They were pretty damn industrialized by the 2000s. And then by the 2010s, they were starting to build more factories. And now they have surpassed the Soviet Union in terms of steel production, and I'm talking about the USSR at its peak, did not produce as much steel as China, and could not produce as many tanks, planes, ships in a month that China can produce now. In the past 5 years, China has become the industrial, economic, financial, and military, and I'm talking basically in conventional military terms, China has become the world hegemon in all those areas, and it's undeniable, it's indisputable fact. Their technology has taken off to a level that has also surpassed us in basically all critical areas. Now, what does that mean? Well, according to their civil-military fusion policy, any civilian technology, property, or mode of transport or resource can be converted or used for military use. And that includes their shipyards for building military ships. It includes ships for transporting troops or whatever, what have you. If you've heard the leaked Chinese thing, allegedly, they're talking, and basically what they were talking about within that was all the concepts of the civil-military fusion policy. What they were talking about, readying ferries for troops, cargo ships, that is all part of the civil military fusion policy. They can move huge amounts of troops that way. But here's the thing, as I've told you and I've shown you in my documentary series, like 96 Hour Invasion and my Pacific Northwest one, and even in my typed out stories in my community tab that I've even made a community tab review playlist for, which is called Community Tab Review, which shows you tactics, talks about the impact of logistics on operations, especially as it pertains to the Chi-Coms and Russians once they invade us. It talks about the impact of logistics for both sides, the partisans and the Chi-Coms and Russians. It also talks about the tactics, which I've used a lot of my tactical experience from personal experience to make those. And it also talks about other aspects like caching away things, evacuation plans to evacuate human settlements whenever conflict arrives, and all the others. Everything I've shown in the stories that was of critical importance that I wanted people to pay attention to, I put in that review playlist, and I suggest people watch it if they're serious. One of the very most important things in there is also field sanitation, because guess what? Typhus, dysentery, and cholera, that's going to kill a lot of people. So you need to know how to dispose of your garbage, because a lot of Americans are going to let garbage pile up, and you know it, and I know it. They're going to let garbage pile up. It's going to attract rats, rodents that have lice, and they're going to spread typhus, and it's going to kill people. Same thing with cholera and dysentery, but only for how human waste is disposed of. People have to learn how to properly manage human waste. It's critical, because those things are going to kill people, and lots of people. And also the tactics are important to know, because you need to know what's going to be used against you by the Chi-Coms and Russians and their allies. And also you might even be able to implement some of those things on your own. You might be able to train with your survival group or whoever you're with. You might be able to learn some tactics. So I suggest you really read those community tab stories and watch the community tab review playlist and watch my documentaries. But enough about that. I'm going to go into more about what I was talking about before, which had to do with the whole situation with the woke military and how they're incapable of conducting operations because they're hampered by the lack of supplies and logistics, and they're hampered by a lack of fuel, which is part of their logistics. So if they're given, they're never going to be given some sort of an operation to go grab everybody's firearms. It's impossible. This country is too vast, and there's too few of them, and they're not well trained, they're not well experienced, they're not well armed anymore. They're increasingly poorly armed due to giving away stocks to other nations. We're even replacing the European nations that have given stuff to that certain European country. We're even replacing their stocks with our stocks to get them to give stuff to the Ukrainians. So, I said it. Oh, well. Anyways, here's the deal. So we're going to be, our armed forces are going to be extremely weak. Even the paramilitary, like the alphabet people, there's just not enough of them. There's not enough of them, and people don't understand that. There's so much fear propaganda, and this goes into what I wanted to discuss about the Smith-Mundt Act. When the Smith-Mundt Act was repealed, what that meant is that propaganda could be used on the American people. Originally, the Smith-Mundt Act only had provisions for allowing it for foreign audiences, pro-Western, pro-American propaganda, pro-elites propaganda, like for whatever they want to do. But now that that's repealed, everybody is seeing the news delivered as propaganda, and it's highly biased, it's highly wrong and incorrect, and some of it is downright lies and total bullshit. And that's what I'm here to do, is kick narratives in the ass. So here's the deal with that. Because you're watching propaganda, because these news stories that somehow, like I said, get into the alternative media and get spread around, because of that, there is a fear campaign going on. People are afraid of stuff like that, and I don't understand why. I mean, sure, it's going to lead to instability, but really, according to the Great Reset, that's really what they want, because they know that in tearing this nation down, they're tearing down their own power base, and when tearing your own power base down, you're also tearing down your security forces, inadvertently or on purpose. And what that's going to cause is it's going to cause instability. Because if you're pushing fear, 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 and then you're having false flags everywhere, you're having the economy collapse, you're having the currency collapse, just so you can build a new currency and a new economy, They're trying to do this by the Hegelian dialectic, which is like their favorite thing in the world for implementing their evil globalist policies. But here's the thing. There's so many wild cards out there that you are going to end up with a situation like the Syrian civil war. It very easily will happen in the United States. Not can happen, it will happen. There's too many wild cards out there, free radicals. There's people lurking in the shadows that already have groups and factions and ideologies, and they're going to be jockeying for power and control, which is why I'm making the scenario. Because I feel I've not devoted enough attention to the whole idea of what an internal conflict would even look like in the United States. So I feel I need to devote attention to that. Because what you are going to have is like in the case of Syria, where Assad was really weak for a while until he got external help. Assad was on the ropes. All these different groups were about to take Assad down because Assad was on the ropes. Well, until Russia, Iran, proxies, and even China later on intervened and saved his ass. But here's the thing. That very easily can and will happen in the United States. You'll have a weak central regime that has these weak, puny, pathetic, woke forces. Because of their lack of fuel, they're not going to be able to airlift or send everybody home that's overseas to help with the internal conflict. So all the stuff they're trying to do is going to backfire because they haven't planned for all the wild cards out there. And what that's going to do is it's going to create a multi-factional internal conflict where everybody is going to be fighting to seize control. But while that's happening, in the background, you're going to have famine, you're going to have disease, you're going to have a lot of different people getting butchered by these factions, including the regime, because yes, the regime will still cling to certain areas, just like I showed you on the hypothetical map I made. Yeah, there will be certain areas that really took to the globalism thing really strongly, that'll be loyal to the regime, but most of the areas of the country will break off of it, and they'll have their own factions, their own ideologies, their own everything, and they're going to cause a lot of trouble. Everything I saw in Iraq will be commonplace type of stuff that'll happen here. This will become the most dangerous country in the world by far. Anything that I saw in the Middle East, or even that others saw in Central Asia, and I'm speaking of Afghanistan, stuff like that will be here, but it'll be a lot worse. It'll be more intense. Because when you have people raiding armories, you have discipline breaking down in the woke military, and you have what few good people are left leaving it to try to do their own thing, they're going to take everything they have with them. And I'm talking about tanks, and I'm talking about whatever they can get on the little bit of fuel they have, they're going to take it. So yeah, this country's totally going to rip itself to pieces. That's just the way it is. And the regime is not strong enough to hold it together. But really, the Eastern elites wanted that. And I hope I'm not confusing people with all of this. This is a lot of stuff to really absorb. And I know that. I understand that. In fact, I'm going to look at the chat. I want to see if people are understanding what I'm saying. Are you all with me here? Yeah, China can open a can of whoop ass. Oh yeah, MB, you're right. It'll be just like Yugoslavia or Syria here. The central regime is not powerful enough. Yeah, data analyst wearing red high heels. Woke military. Yup, waterborne disease will kill people. Hey, Jen. Hey, sweetie. Yeah, I like Ice Age Farmers. He's good, MB. Yeah, I like him too, Jennifer. He's good. With all the food stuff especially. Yeah, well, yeah, COINTELPRO, I'm not doing literal Syria. I'm doing an American-style Syrian thing. I mean, like in America, it's going to be Syrian-style. I'm sorry, I reversed that. It's going to be like what happened in Syria, like based off of that model, but happening here. Syria, Yugoslavia, certain African civil wars. I've combined aspects of all of them into one. It's going to be pretty brutal. I'm going to make it as real as I can. And by that, I mean, I'm putting every last single solitary last freaking detail into it. I'm talking about logistics. I'm talking about fuel consumption. I'm talking about vehicles that break down that can't be recovered because there's no parts to fix them. I'm talking about food, you know, being very scarce in certain areas. Oh, I'm throwing every last detail into it because when I was in the military, all our operations hinged on whether our logistics could support it or not. even just to launch a major operation, do you all understand? Like when we recaptured all the farmland in eastern Iraq and Diyala province to give it back to the really weak Iraqi puppet regime at the time, and they were weak because literally what we did once we seized control and occupied Iraq, we built up a puppet army from scratch. We didn't use the old Iraqi army, which was a big mistake because they were at least trained enough to do policing operations. But what we did was we disbanded the old Iraqi army and we built a puppet force from scratch. And they were straight garbage. These guys were ate the hell up. They couldn't fight worth a damn. They would throw their weapons down and retreat if we weren't there to back them up. Do you guys understand? Just to launch a major operation on a like, I guess a few battalion levels where it's a few thousand people, and along with puppet forces and everything. It was a big operation in Operation Saber Tempest. There were at least like 3,000 to 4,000 forces involved. It was us and our foreign allies, including the Iraqi puppet forces. We had to take back a huge chunk of Diyala province, which was Iraq's breadbasket, or rice basket, I guess. We had to take it back so the weak puppet regime could feed its people, because it was held by militias and various armed groups. We had to take it back, and that was pretty extensive. Just to do an operation like that, can you fathom the amount of food you need to stockpile, the amount of artillery shells, because we did our fire missions here and there, the amount of artillery shells, the amount of bullets, the amount of magazines, the amount of parts for vehicles, the amounts of light anti-tank weapons, because our puppet regime buddies, they had RPG-7s. We needed to make, we had to supply them too. We had to literally buy old Russian weapons from other nations to give to them because that's what they were most familiar with. We also did give them some of our small arms, like M16 A4s and M16 A3s. We gave them those, but so very few of them got M4s. It was mostly like AKs and some M16s. But anyway, just to have an operation like that, you need to have literal tons of food, tons of water. You need to, and I mean like many, many, many tons. You need to have a whole, I don't even know how many rounds, what the full weight of the bullets combined would have been, or the full weight of the artillery shells, just to transport all that stuff, the parts for the vehicles, to do all the maintenance, just to launch these operations. I'm telling you, the woke military cannot do it. They cannot do it. They're not big enough. They're not strong enough. They're not coordinated enough. They're not trained enough. I bet you half of them don't even know how to freaking change a tire. I bet you they don't even know how to change a tire, much less fucking pull up. I'm sorry, I cursed. I didn't mean to. Pull a pack on a vehicle. That's my army mouth. Forgive me, y'all. But yeah, I'm sorry. They don't know how to pull a pack on a vehicle. They don't know how to change a tire. They don't know how to do none of that. I bet you most of them don't, because they purged all the good, experienced people, and they replaced them with this rotten, low down, no good, video game playing woke ass generation of people that can't do anything on their own. So, do you expect an army like that to perform well in the field? I don't. There are 7 million combat veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan, and I would say, and I'm one of those 7 million, and I would say that of those 7 million, I'd say about maybe 5 million are still able-bodied enough to do the sorts of things they used to do. Now take that 5 million and maybe about 10 million of other veterans that never deployed but had the training, take them from the old army and split them up into different factions and groups that'll end up training those groups and making them more effective and giving them some backbone as far as experience and everything. Take those people, split them up, send them into different groups. That's essentially what my scenario depicts. Now, what you're going to have is you're going to have the most dangerous country on earth. You're going to have these woke tards holding down very small portions of the nation, like in my scenario. And you're going to have a bunch of different factions that grow very powerful, that challenge the regime and each other, and it's basically just a multi-way slaughter fest. That is an internal Syrian-style conflict, and you all are going to see it when I put out my documentary. I've done it in story form and with interactive battle maps, where I'm actually going to show the map on camera like I did with my Chinese invasion stuff. So it'll be like story time and map time, like a real, like a History Channel documentary. It'll be just like that level of detail. So even though as good as my older stuff is, this is going to be much better, I think, because I'm going to read it like a story to you guys, and then I'm going to show the battle maps for the biggest battles, and then I'm going to go back to story reading as far as like where things end up and all of it. So every last detail will be presented. But what I was saying, all in all, everything is going to backfire on these elites, and I've explained to you diligently why that's the case. Do you understand that their grip on power is basically going to be like null and void? This is a nation of 340 million people. I mean, it's very close to that. It's like 335, 6, something like that. And then you got all the undocumented, I'll call them, in this country. So it's at least 340 million people within our borders, okay? Then you have all the foreign troops on CCP regime properties, but they're going to stay there until they get their signal to launch the invasion. The Chinese and the Russians and all the ones hiding out on CCP properties that they've already purchased, that, as according to the Chinese civil military fusion policy, will be their bases of operation, that are all very close and strategically located near key strategic objectives, so that they can capture them lightning quick, while their external forces drive deep inland from Canada and Mexico and beach land and paradrop in. Imagine after a long internal conflict, well, not a long one, but you know what I'm saying, like a slightly drawn out but very intense internal conflict. Then all of a sudden, all these Chi-coms just come out of every nook, cranny, and crevice. Can you imagine that? I mean, really. I mean, like, in the scenarios I made, we were invaded during a best case scenario where there was no weakening from an internal conflict that ended up being very bloody and disastrous. No, it was during the best case scenario, like we are now, like relative peace, and then we get invaded, and we still lost badly because we lost within 4 days. And I used real data to simulate why that happened. Real data, real units, real vehicles, real everything. I put all the realistic stuff I could find into that docu-series, and I made it as real as can be. And according to hybrid war, that was designed to show you what hybrid war doctrines look like with real units, real combatants from both sides. I even added small groups of American armed people that clicked up to try to resist, like as reactionary forces, but they got butchered because they were being reactionary. They had no actionable intel. They had no way to fight armored formations, massive formations of tanks and armored infantry and everything else, the artillery. See, being reactionary will get you butchered. All the smart people evacuated. They waited for the enemies to get comfortable and complacent before they started doing things. But all the reactionary idiots went out and got destroyed. Because Bubba's not going to run out with his shotgun and take on the Chi-Com army at his freaking mailbox. That's not going to happen. That's fantasy fairy tales. That's illusion. It doesn't work like that. Armies have ways that they work, okay? They work as teams. They work as a team. And a combined arms team can, if they're all well-trained enough, like these gung-ho Chi-Coms and these gung-ho Russians and their allies, if they're well-trained and disciplined enough, there ain't nothing you can throw at them that's gonna be able to effectively take them on. Especially if you're a civilian. You need to wait for them to get comfy and get into their complacent mode, where they're in their occupation mode, before you would even attempt to actually try to do something like in my stories. And even then, people still got butchered horribly. They got butchered horribly. But here's the deal. In a scenario where you have an internal conflict, the power of the Western elites is over with. It's done. It's over. Because you're going to have all these things that they thought were going to work backfire on them. They're going to lose their grip on power. Russia and China are going to come in, and they're going to wipe everybody out. They're going to take slaves, and they're going to exterminate a large swathe of people. And they're going to capture these Western elites. They're going to humiliate them. They might even use some of them as a footstool for Xi Jinping on his throne. I showed you that picture of Xi Jinping on his gold and red throne. He's the red dragon. He's the god of the CCP that they all worship over there. He is their god over there. You have to understand that. In China, they have a way that they look at their leaders. They look at their leaders like little g gods, and Xi Jinping is their god. Everywhere that Chi-Com troops go, so does Chinese propaganda. Like in Serbia, I showed you the Xi Jinping billboard and written in Chinese and in Serbian. That's so the Serbs can see that Xi Jinping is with them and looking over them. I mean, it's kind of warped if you think about it. It's pretty twisted stuff, but it's like they really believe that. They worship the state because they're secular humanists. And one of the factions in my internal conflict is an American secular humanist extremist element, and they basically want to make America a god. Like they don't they take it such a in such a weird direction that it gets extreme, and even though they started out with noble goals, it ends up getting really extreme and out of hand because it's total lawlessness. It's lawlessness. There's no law and order. It's might makes right in an internal conflict. Whoever has the best, biggest, most badass weapons is he who basically runs things. So I'm going to basically feature the dark underbelly of human society when I do this internal conflict. It's not going to be for the faint of heart. This is what you call tough love. This is a form of love because I'm a firm, strong believer in firm, tough love. I believe in self-defense because it's a righteous Christian act, because I take a hard line on self-defense because that is all throughout the Bible, and God never changes. If it was in the Bible, then it still applies today. You must defend yourself from evil forces. It is a must. Because guess what? I don't ever want Revelation 21:8 to apply to me, because I know I'm able-bodied and I know I have a duty to protect the people around me and to protect myself. So in so doing, I don't want to die and be considered a coward and be cast into the outer darkness because I knew I could have done something to help people and to defend people. I'm a soldier by trade. That is my trade. That was my literal career. I was a military man. I was an army soldier. That was my entire career. That was my career decision. So the fact that I have that in me. Being a soldier is the oldest trade in the world. It's the oldest trade on Earth because when primitive human villages were formed, they needed security. So soldiers were the very first career on the Earth, if you think about it, because security is a must. You must have security. So even in very, very way back ancient times, you would have had village security. You would have armed men guarding their villages because that's a must. So soldiering is the oldest career in the world. And I feel very privileged in a way to have chosen that career, but now I'm a soldier for God. So in so doing, I try to educate people on how to navigate all this stuff because it's of dire critical importance. You will have to know, because let me tell you something. All the stuff I did on the Chinese and Russian invasion, guess what? That stuff still applies in an internal conflict. Evacuating where you're at if you're under attack, defending yourself with actual battle tactics. I try to teach people these things. It's up to people to go and learn it. I'm a teacher. I'm an educator. I am an educator. And I am trying to educate people. I'm trying to show them a new perspective on things because things are not what they seem. As my title says, there's illusions, but there's also implications that I want people to see. There's very, very important implications to all of these things, okay? And I want you all to survive. So that's why I do what I do, because I want you all to live. I want you all to make it. I want you all to be able to navigate this stuff. So in order to do that, I try to give you the best information that I can find. I'm a researcher. I'm an analyst. And the way I see things, if you've been with me through all my lives, then you really understand the way the world really works. Because most people aren't seeing it as a very multifaceted type of a thing. People see what goes on in the world and think it's a cut and dry thing. It is not a cut and dry thing. There are all kinds of people, all kinds of interests, all kinds of entities that all intersect and interact. So you have to be able to learn how to dissect those things, to see what's really happening, to see trends and patterns and learn from that. So you know that there's a two different elites, and that there's not, that there's not just the Western elites running things. It's the Eastern elites too, because they're letting the West play its little Great Reset game so that they could come in and crush it, because the West wanted to tear itself apart so it could build itself back better with all its 5 to the G stuff and everything else. But guess what? The system that comes in and replaces it is going to be an Eastern-centric system of the 10 kings and the beast, who will flatter them to gain their power, to rule with them for 1 hour, like it says in the Bible, to reign with the 10 kings. The beast will reign, or the beast and the 10 kings will reign together for 1 hour. And 1 hour in Bible times is merely some months. Not exactly sure how many months, but it's some months, because we know a day is a year in the Bible. 7 days, the week, Daniel's 70th week. So here's the deal with that. They want to destroy the West, and they're going to replace their Great Reset. The Great Reset is a sacrifice, in other words. It's going to be sacrificed. For one thing, Satan eats his own. And if you think these snobby, snotty, uber-rich, little pretty hands-having, because they have little pretty hands because they've never worked a day in their lives, silver spoon crammed in their ass type of elites, if you think that Satan wants them to be co-rulers with his son, you're crazy. That's psychotic. Why would Satan want a bunch of pansies to rule with his son? No. Satan wants warlords to rule with his son, the beast. He wants Xi Jinping, China's emperor for life. He wants Vladimir Putin, the European warlord. He wants Kim Jong-un, who wants to unite Korea and be a strong man there. He wants the Pakistani and Iranian leaders, maybe the Indian leader. And what I was saying earlier about India, with these naval drills going on, China's looking at India and doing these drills. And China's been wheeling and dealing with India, so is Russia. You have to understand, India is actually turning to the Eastern Eurasian bloc, and it's starting to ditch the idea of working with the United States. So India has abandoned the Quad, and what they're doing with the naval drills is merely for show. It's just for show. It doesn't mean anything. It's just for show, because they're about to bow out and stick with the new system. If we already know, which is an established fact, it's an established fact that we already know that China and Russia have their own system. Evergrande means nothing. Like I said earlier, all Evergrande is, like I said in my community post, was a way to hurt the West. Just like how they shut down Shanghai port. It only hurt Western investors, and it's only going to hurt the Western property market, okay? It's not going to hurt China. China is the biggest gold holder in the world. How can China be broke? That is the most asinine, ridiculous statement I've ever heard in my life. China can back the yuan with their gold. They're about to do a petro-yuan. The only reason that we're even still afloat, even some semblance of being afloat, is because the petrodollar scheme allowed for that. It allowed for this nation to live exceedingly above its means, while, the other nations ended up having to get scammed for it, essentially. They got scammed out of money while we took that type of money to keep ourselves afloat that we made off of our little scheme, our little kickback scheme there, which is really what that is, So China's about to do the same thing, which will allow them to live way above their means. And China's already the most powerful economy on earth, because our economy is made of funny money. And like if you saw my old videos from last year where I reported on the real numbers that our economy had shrunk by a third last year. A third. GDP, business, everything. It shrunk by a third. So imagine how much it's shrunk this year with all the inflation going on, with all the supply chain issues, with all the people being laid off, everything going out of business. Oh, and speaking of which, I wanted to tie in my beautiful Jennifer. She is about to do something on her channel that I think is awesome, that ties in with what I'm talking about now. And I wanted to bring it up, to bring some good attention, some positivity to her channel. She is talking about going out and doing lives while she's actually shopping at places like Rural King and the grocery stores and whatnot, because she wants to show price changes and how drastically they go up. Meanwhile, and I hope she does that, because you know what? that backs up even more everything we already know that's established facts, because that's just going to back it up that much more. And it's going to show how bad things are getting and how fast it's getting bad here. The West is the only one having these problems. It's not the East. Russia just had their biggest grain harvest ever. And I can't remember how many years Putin said, but he was bragging and boasting about it. Russia had produced excess grain. And also, India is keeping all theirs. And then you have China, who hoarded all this food. China, the biggest gold holder in the world, financially the most powerful for it, who's about to do the petro-yuan, who's already the top economy, who's already the most powerful conventional military on the planet, on the earth. I'm sorry, not planet, but you know what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying. Words, stupid words. But anyway, on Earth, China is the most powerful. China has the third biggest nuke arsenal, and the real numbers are closer to 1,000 because that's how much fissile material they have. In the last 30 years, China has had access to at least 20 tons of weapons-grade uranium, and also about 4 tons of plutonium. So that's easily enough for them to, by now, have about 1,000 nukes. Easily. Really, they could have more, but I think that they have about 1,000. I think that's the most realistic estimate based on the number of fissile material they have, as well as how many missile silos they've added in Xinjiang, in Inner Mongolia, that already go with what they've already had in Manchuria, where their original DF-31s were. But anyways, they basically have enough nukes to destroy 2 large nations if they wanted to. But China's not concerned with nukes. The primary instrument of China's power is their economic might, their Belt and Road Initiative, which has allowed them to subjugate many nations, especially third world nations. A lot of African and Latin American nations, some Asian nations have been subjugated by China, who now makes their policies because they defaulted on loans that China gave them or projects that China did, infrastructure projects. So now China gets to dictate to them what their policies are and who gets to be the leader in those third world nations. So China is the world's superpower. They also, being that they have the most powerful conventional military on Earth, their military is all over the place. Their military is in Africa. Their military is in Iran, because Iran and China did a defense deal. They're about to be in Saudi Arabia, too. China has military, like I said, in Africa. They have a legal base in Djibouti, but they also have troops in other parts of Africa that go with their Belt and Road scheme. China is just a massive power. They're more industrialized and produce more steel than the next 20 nations combined, and that's a fact. 1 billion tons a year, while we only produce, what is it now? It's like 76 million tons, million with an M, while they produce 1 billion tons. So, we're nowhere close to what China has. And China's factories, just Norinco alone has 300 major arms plants. Major. And when I say major, I mean these are huge facilities. They're as big as that tank plant we have in Lima, Ohio, or larger, or bigger. So that Lima tank plant is our only tank plant. We have 1 tank plant. China's Norinco has 300 major plants, and they have also smaller plants. I don't know how many, but I would estimate that's at least in the dozens. The other part, like China South Industries Group, also has a few hundred factories, and we only have just barely over a dozen big factories, just over a dozen, like 13 or 14 big factories. We have 4 dedicated military shipyards. China has 1,200 because their civil military fusion policy allows for any shipyard they want to be retooled to be able to build military ships. So they have 1,200 shipyards that can be used for military production. They're a communist nation, so they can do that. We have 4 dedicated shipyards because we're a fascist nation, so big corporate arms dealers get priority, and there's only a few of them. There's only a handful, so they get to have monopolies and stuff here. While China, everybody tries to work together to build China up. So we've really let ourselves go. We've gotten small and weak, pathetic, woke, broken, and part of that is due to the Chinese influencing policy, but also part of it is due to the Western elites influencing policy. And China has played the Western elites by probably lying to them and giving them reassurances that they're not going to do anything, when secretly the CCP has been talking about taking over America for quite some time and colonizing it. and making Chinese into good Americans, as Wei Fang said as a joke in one of his speeches, which is pretty sick if you think about it, because he's talking about genociding Americans and supplanting them with Chinese as colonists. So, yeah, China has sent their agents. You don't get to be the head of a corporation in China because they're only a quasi-free market. You still have to pledge loyalty to the regime, to the CCP, to Xi Jinping. So loyalty to Xi Jinping is a must in China. So the Chinese emissaries that go to these big meetings that pretend to play nice with them, what they're really doing is egging them on to keep doing their self-destructive green energy stuff. These sanctions on Russia backfired, so Russia's experiencing growth at this time, and the West is suffering. Europe is actually like dying right now from not being able to have the energy resources it needs to run factories, industries, to run power, everything. Europe is really hurting right now. Their fuel is through the roof, and America's about to be in the same situation. So Russia and China really only need each other because Russia sends China resources. China sends Russia finished goods. Russia sends China food. And basically the two of them are the two most powerful nations on earth. China's the top dog, of course, but then Russia's number two. Even though Russia has a bigger nuke arsenal than China, that China still has enough nukes to where they're still a superpower. They're the superpower because of their conventional military and all the other things I mentioned that make them the most powerful nation on earth. Their army is the tool of their policies. So if their foreign policy wants to colonize the United States, their army, their conventional forces, are who's going to enforce that. Sure, yeah, China might nuke a few cities. Russia might nuke a few cities, but Russia and China are primarily going to send in their conventional forces, which combined are way more than enough to occupy this whole land. Meanwhile, we have a 2.2 million man woke military that can't really do shit. So they can't fight a war. They're not in any condition or shape to really fight any kind of war. They're really not in any shape to enforce any type of police actions. So if they try to go after people's arms, they're not big enough. They can only occupy a few cities at a time, you guys. It's not like they can, like, spread out nationwide and be everywhere. They're not big enough to be a ubiquitous force like China and Russia can. So, again, that goes back to them trying to cause an internal conflict, but what they didn't estimate is how many wild cards and crazy people and extremists are probably in the background plotting and planning and waiting for the moment to come out of the shadows, like in Syria. I mean, once the riots began in Syria, guess what? All the factions that had been sitting back and waiting for their opportunity, they all came out and introduced themselves amid the rioting, and they became these different groups. And then you had like the IS, they became a very strong group in Syria. Well, I have a parallel to that called the Mormon State, and they're going to be pretty radical. And the National Salvation Revolutionary Front is really radical and dangerous, but they're secular humanists. But they're just as evil, if not a little more evil than the they're about the same as the Mormon State, which the Mormon State ends up getting rid of the globalist clergy response team guy that runs it right now, and they supplanted it with an extremist sect that basically perforated through the mainstream and introduced their radical theology and changed the entire area to become believers into their extremist part of the Mormon church. So that type of stuff can happen. That stuff is very easy to happen. And you have all kinds of groups that are feeling threatened right now. So when you have all this stuff happening, these false flags, the shortages, the economy and currency breaking down, guess what? Once riots start, all bets are off. You never know who's going to come out of the shadows once the food riots and the food stamp riots and whatever else riots begin, because you're going to see the government default on all its obligations, like its benefits payouts, its welfare payouts, its retirement pensions. The government, when the currency collapses, like Operation Sandman, you see China's Evergrande. I see that as them setting up to do their full dumping of American bonds and currency, to dump the petrodollar. I see Evergrande as actually a part of that scheme. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, look, they hurt our investors, they hurt our housing market, and they're going to get ready to dump the petrodollar next, okay? That's going to be like the death knell in this nation. When their currency becomes worthless as the petrodollar's gone, they're not going to be able to buy anything with it. I mean, it's going to be like confetti. If I mean, if anything, it's just going to be like confetti or toilet paper. I mean, what are they going to buy with it? They're going to be broke. They're not going to be able to enforce anything. So what they're going to do is they're going to promise the troops that even though they can't pay them, they're going to feed them and house them. And what they're going to do is they're only going to be able to hold down like regime loyalist areas. While other factions end up doing smart things like making gold-backed money. Like Texas has a gold depository. Did you know that? That's one of the factions on my hypothetical map. Texas has $1 billion worth of gold. So in an economic collapse, when the dollar becomes worthless, $1 billion in gold of former money is going to be worth a whole hell of a lot more in the collapsed money. But that's not even going to be an issue because they're not going to use collapsed money. What they're going to do is they'll probably introduce a Texas dollar that's backed by their gold stocks and their precious metal reserves. Same in other parts of the country. You have a lot of individuals in the United States that have gold and silver, and what they would do is they would barter or trade with it or form their own little currencies, like in my scenario. So basically, that is the future of America right before it gets invaded. There will be some semblance of an economy, but it'll be like a barter economy or a black market sort of economy that'll exist. And each and every faction will have their own areas where they have their own sorts of economies. But they're going to be all jockeying for power, so this place is going to be a madhouse. It'll be like Assad's regime in Syria when it was about to lose. That's what this nation will look like. You'll have a collapsed, weak central regime that has like almost no power to do anything. And what they're going to do is they're just going to try to cling on to what areas they can with what little troops they have. They're going to try and beg and plead for like foreign volunteers to come and help them. Like all these people they illegally flown in here, like all these immigrants and stuff. They're going to try and get the able-bodied men out of them to fight for them. And they're undisciplined and they're unexperienced. So what some of them will do is they'll probably desert or run away or whatever, or they're trying to get some of these woke militias, these woke groups to turn into militias, and they'll probably get them to try to fight and just do human wave assaults where they will get mowed down so that the good people can be saved for other offensives. You know what I'm saying? It'll be a madhouse. This place will be nuts. This place is going to be lawless. It's going to be a mess. I mean, but I guess if there's a silver lining in all of it, it'll be that the regime really has no power. All the fear campaigns and fear propaganda they put out about what they plan to do, who they're going to do it to, how they're going to do it, it'll all be for nothing. It was all a fear campaign, you guys. Like, once you can see clearly, you start to recognize these things. Because then you look at them and you laugh and you say, how are you going to enforce it when you don't have the logistics to? It just becomes a joke. Like, when I see all these, like, firearm things, oh, they're so scared, they're going to come and get their stuff. It's like, really? Really? 2.2 million, and most of them aren't even here because you have the Navy, the Coast Guard guys, you have like forces overseas. Who's going to come and get your stuff? And how? How is that going to work? There's like more firearms than people, and there's a lot of veterans in this country that are able-bodied enough to defend themselves with real training and real experience. So it's sort of going to work against them in that regard. I mean, really. I mean, it's going to be like Syria is like the perfect template for it. Syria mixed with a little bit of Yugoslavia. And then the Eastern elites are going to be the ones that win out because those are going to be your 10 kings that end up reigning with the beast. It's not going to be the Rothschilds, Rockefellers. No, those people will be captured and they'll be sent to Chinese concentration camps where they'll learn how to meet the quota. And they're going to break big rocks into small rocks, or they're going to be sewing tennis shoes. I mean, I think about that. I get those visions in my mind sometimes where I see Klaus Schwab trying to sew a Nike, and a Chinese PAP guard comes by, and he says, Klaus Schwab says, "Do you know who I am?" And he says, "Shut up, Guai." And Guai in Chinese roughly translates to like white devil or white demon. "Shut up, Guai. Meet effing quota." Smacks Klaus on the head. Ugh. I mean, you got to laugh sometimes, you guys. You got to laugh. But No, they're totally going to take these elites and they're going to pull them out of all their little hidey holes in their bunkers because they're going to send Chinese troops down there after them, or Russians. They're going to capture them like they did to Saddam, and they're going to pull them out of their holes, and then they're going to end up in a Chinese concentration camp for the rest of their short, miserable lives. So that's the future I see for the West. Europe is going to be steamrolled by Russia and China because China has troops in Serbia to help Russia conquer Europe when the time comes for World War III. And China and Russia are already in North America too. So, and on Australia, I can't leave you guys out, and New Zealand. You guys have a lot of Chi-coms in your country too, and they're ready to pop out of hiding. Hybrid warfare is going to be a thing all over the world, especially in the West. See, China and Russia know how to subvert things. They know how to weaponize organizations. Even the UN as it stands right now, this is very important, you guys. The UN as it is right now has totally been compromised by China. Tedros is a Chinese shill who does China's bidding. And Tedros, you know who he is. His little treaty is only about hurting the West. It's not about hurting China or Russia. It's only going to hurt the West. China subverted everything. They subverted that treaty. It's all to destabilize and destroy the West. And once people understand that there is a separate set of elites and they are trying to destroy the West. It's not just the Western elites trying to do their little Great Reset scheme that's going to fail miserably. It's the Eastern elites that are going to overtake them, and they're going to implement the real beast system, which will be an Eastern-centric system. So that's going to be the future. And once you understand that, everything you see, when you understand the logistics that go into things, what the planning it takes to do things, all the wild cards that are in things, like just the whole thing. When you see the supply chain collapsing, then you have a clear grip on how it's quite impossible to carry out large-scale military operations when you don't even have the damn parts or the fuel or the trained troops to even do it. How are they going to do it? And there's not enough of them. Do you understand how vast and how big the United States is in land mass? Do you understand how many firearms and things are here? No, they can't take anybody's firearms. Nobody's going to do that. Nobody's that damn stupid. I mean, some people are, but I'm saying most people aren't. There's nobody that's going to be able to enforce such a measure because they don't have the ability to do it, number one, and there's not enough of them, number two, and they're not even trained for something like that, number three. So when you see all these idle threats coming out of the news media, just remember that it's all propaganda. It's all a fear campaign. All you have to do is say to yourself, oh, that's right, Smith-Mundt was never reinstated. It's been repealed. So, yeah, they're just using propaganda on me. They're trying to whip me into a frenzy. So when you see these things, you need to understand that. It's just to whip you into a frenzy. It's just to scare you. It's just to make you fear. It's all about destabilizing things. And both sets of elites want to do it, but they want to do it for different reasons. And that goes back to the very beginning of the whole conversation, that the whole thing has to be seen in that context. There's two opposite sets of elites that are like two rival mafia clans. Even mafia families will sit down and have business dealings with each other, but they also stab each other in the back. They also plot and scheme against each other. They also if they have different goals and objectives, they try to get the best of one another. That's exactly what's been happening, and that's what's going on now. And there is going to be a finale, and the finale is going to be when the West is destroyed by China, Russia, and their allies, and then the 10 kings will reign with the beast for 1 hour. For a short time, there will be a beast system, and it will be Eastern-centric. Never forget that. It'll be China, Russia, and their allies based. It'll be Eastern-centric. It won't be ruled by anyone from the West. The Antichrist will flatter the 10 kings to gain their power because they are all warlords who will come out victorious in World War III. And what the beast will do is he's going to save Israel from getting invaded by the 10 kings, and he's going to make a covenant after he concludes World War III with some sort of a peace treaty. He's going to save Israel, and that's how the beast is going to rise. That's how he's going to come out of obscurity, like the Bible says. Like, he's going to come out of obscurity. So he's just going to come out of nowhere, and he's going to make peace after World War III and unite the world with the 10 kings for 1 hour, for several months, for 5 months, 6 months, however long it is. And that's going to be the beast system. And a lot of people are going to perish under it, but then God's wrath comes down and the beast system falls apart because there's infighting between the 10 kings, because people get greedy. People get greedy. And that applies to leaders as much as it applies to ordinary people. So yeah, you're going to have backstabbing going on. Satan just cannot help himself. Satan eats his own. He eats his own. He cannot help himself. So there will never be cohesion among the elites. They only appear that way at times, but there's really so much going on that people don't pay attention to or that people aren't seeing. And that's what I say about the illusion part. There's so many illusions out there. I am a researcher, an analyst, and I love to bust narratives. So what I'm doing tonight is I'm giving you a new perspective to help you bust narratives. No, China is not going broke. That's psychotic. Anyone who thinks that is mentally retarded, because China is the biggest gold holder on earth. China is doing a yuan renminbi, which is their full name of their currency. They're doing a yuan renminbi. So they also have the biggest gold reserves on earth. I did a gold video about China and Russia's gold deposits. Russia's the second biggest. Russia has virtually nearly no foreign debt whatsoever. Russia's very financially responsible. They actually have budget surpluses. They're rich in resources. And China and Russia getting together and being very close allies like they are, doing military exercises together in the Navy and with their armies, air forces. They're getting ready. They know what's coming. They know that they need to unite to destroy the West, and they've been doing that very diligently for many years. And when Nixon opened the doors to dealings with China, he made a deal with the devil, because China is not part of the Western elites. They are their own entity, and so is Russia. You know, they just have dealings with the Western elites. But China took advantage of us. They stole from us. And that's how they became a superpower, is because they created their own indigenous capabilities once they've stolen enough Western technology and Western trade secrets, Western industrial espionage activities that they've done. Once they've done enough of that, that's how they propelled themselves to the very top. China rapidly industrialized. China was already an industrial nation, but China rapidly industrialized from the 90s and onward. And now they have so many factories that they put the United States to shame. And our factories have deteriorated. Many of our production's capabilities have been sent overseas, so we're not able to produce war materiel like we could have in World War II. Our weapons are overly complicated. They're not streamlined. They're not simple to make. They're overly complicated. They break down all the time. That is not a military that is ready for a world war. That's not an industry that's ready for a world war. Besides that, the hybrid war doctrines ensure that the United States will fall rapidly and that it'll fall hard. Even if we didn't have an internal conflict, guess what? China and Russia could still take this place in 1 to 2 days. So really 4 days is a best case scenario for us, because if we can last 4 days, that's like a wow type of thing for us. But that I made those scenarios to be a best case, and we still lost horribly with all the data I plugged in to the entire thing. All the real units I used, all the real types of maneuvers that they would do, everything that I figured into that is as real as it gets as far as how it relates to hybrid war doctrines being used to capture the United States. So in an internal conflict, I'm going to show you every last single solitary detail of that. So here's the thing. Besides China's massive steel production and factories, They do have a massive defense budget, because according to purchasing power parity, their defense budget is almost as much as ours is, because with purchasing power parity adjustments, their yuan gets them basically a lot more for their money. Same with the Russian ruble, which is going up in value, by the way. The Russian ruble just keeps, compared to the dollar, it keeps dropping and dropping, which means it's increasing in value. So the last time I actually took a look at it, it was like 60 something. I think it was like 62 rubles to a dollar, and it's going to keep going down because the West has basically shot itself in the foot. So, Yeah, when they take the United States over, what they're going to do, like I've told you in my scenarios, if you go watch them, they're going to use anti-satellite weapons to blind us. They're going to use a cyber attack because the Chinese they have the crown jewels. China has the crown jewels of the United States, and they of course shared it with Russia because China is the one that did the solar winds hack. So China can get in there, they can shut our entire nuclear deterrent off because they can interfere in the communications and military networks. They can shut all that down. They can shut down the grid, whatever's left of it after an internal conflict, because you have to understand very, very few power plants are going to be up and running in an internal conflict, especially once the supply chain is broken down completely and you only have local abilities to transport goods, because in local areas you use less fuel. You can only use what you produce. So if you produce food in a local area, that population will end up eating. But a population in a city, especially a city that gets besieged by enemy forces, if it's a different faction, that city's going to starve to death. It'll be like medieval times. It's going to be brutal in an internal conflict. So I'm going to figure so many things into that. Everything right down to the last detail, like I said, even when weapons break down in the middle of use, or when fuel runs out and they have to abandon certain vehicle types, or if certain vehicle types somehow manage to actually fly, if it's an aircraft, because they get enough enough fuel for their vehicles. So yeah, the food and the fuel deteriorating. When I told you guys my actual my predictions, when I said to you guys that I predicted by mathematics, basic accounting math, with all the data I had available, when I told you guys, what was it, a few months ago, 2 months ago, when I said my predictions, they were my personal predictions that I had kept to myself, but I decided to share them. I'm not telling you to believe them. I'm merely telling you that was what I believed based on the data I have. Now, I could be off. I mean, there's a margin of error. By margin of error, meaning I might be not exactly on time, but I might be close enough to it. Maybe a margin of error being like a month or maybe a few weeks or so. But when I predicted that Ukraine would collapse by July and that would finish up, it looks like it's on track to actually do that. So sometime in July, Ukraine will be over with. I'm predicting that. I could be wrong, and I'm not saying I'm going to be right. I'm saying that that's what I predict, based on the fact that they're now down to using old men, and they're basically like a light infantry force because most of their heavy weapons have been destroyed. You have to understand, Russia sent in a very small force. They only sent in like 70-something battalions, like 70 battalions even, I think. I think it's an even 70, which is like 63, maybe 65,000 troops tops. Their military is 3.2 million men, and then their paramilitary forces, which are like their National Guard type of elements, are 300,000. So Russia has 3.5 million total when you figure in reserves, active, and paramilitary. And Russia only sent in a very, very puny force that ground the entire Ukrainian military down to the nub, basically. That is a crazy, phenomenal victory for such a tiny force to achieve what they've achieved with so comparatively small losses. That's incredible. The United States has mischaracterized the entire Russian war strategy. The war strategy was to use a limited incursion to give their whole military strategic flexibility to be able to respond to other areas in case of a NATO issue or whatever, because Russia is a vast territory. And they have to guard the Arctic. They have to guard the borders with Finland and the Baltic states, and with Poland, where they have their little enclave, Kaliningrad. They have to guard so much stuff. They have to guard the southern borders with Georgia and, because Turkey's down there, in case Turkey wants to get froggy. So, Russia needed strategic flexibility. So what Russia did was they sent in a puny force, and this puny force was a pretty well-equipped puny force, and they ground down the whole Ukrainian military that locally outnumbered the small Russian force sent in by about like 10 to 1 in numbers. So they had about 600-something thousand troops, and Russia ground them down, destroyed their air force. They have no air superiority. They really don't have much artillery left. The West keeps trying to give them stuff because all Ukraine's heavy weapons that they began the war with are mostly gone. Whatever wasn't hidden in some sort of a bunker system has been destroyed because it's been identified and it's been hit by cruise missiles, tactical ballistic missiles like the Iskander, or the cruise missiles are like the Calibers and other types, or artillery if it's in a local area, or strategic heavy bombers, which they finally just started to use because Russia does have a huge strategic bomber force, the biggest in the world if you take all the stored and maintained bombers too. If you look at all the bombers ever produced by the Soviet Union and now Russia, it's a humongous amount. And the only nations that now operate heavy bombers are Russia, United States, and China. There's only 3 nations right now in the world that have strategic heavy bombers. Everybody else uses tactical fighter bombers or just plain fighter jets, which can be multi-role, that sometimes can do ground strike operations. But China, Russia, and the United States are the only nations with bomber fleets, and we have the smallest one. Russia has way more bombers, and they just recently used their strategic bombers when they dropped the KAB-500s, which are these huge thermobaric munitions. They dropped those in Mariupol. And a few other places now. They also can launch standoff cruise missiles at ground targets, and they can also do carpet bombing. They also used tactical fighter bombers to do ground attack missions as well. So Russia's been hitting every corner of Ukraine with a very small force, with very little air support used here and there. So Russia is quite powerful if one of their small forces can deal the damage it's dealt and basically wear down the West by getting us to commit a whole bunch of resources, a whole bunch of weapons, a whole bunch of money. Ukraine is a black hole for everything. It really is, if you think about it. It really, really is. So, yeah, they've ground down the West. They like Project Grayman, someone else I listened to. He's a pretty decent guy. I like what he has to say. He called it a rope-a-dope, and that's the perfect name for what Russia's doing. So China, they're doing their own form of an economic rope-a-dope, where they ceased sending us goods and components and chips and whatever else we need to, for military equipment and for even just civilian stuff. They've ceased sending it to us through really shisty means, like shutting ports down and letting Evergrande go belly up at the right time to bankrupt our economy when it's in its lowest low with the whole entire situation with the supply chain and just everything breaking down. So the Evergrande thing is only going to hurt the West. It's only going to hurt us. And then China can dump the petrodollar. Russia basically doesn't need it anymore because they're under sanctions, but they're doing very well, and the sanctions have backfired. I'm telling you, these Western elites are arrogant and stupid people. They're stupid because they're full of hubris, They and the Eastern elites are both equally evil. They're both evil, but the Western elites are evil with hubris and pride, and they're arrogant and snobby, and that's going to be their downfall. Really, I hate both of them. I hate the Eastern elites and I hate the Western elites. But I will say this, the Eastern elites are a lot more cunning and intelligent. They have a different mindset than these arrogant Western elites that are being played and being manipulated to destroy their own power base so that the other power players can come in and take it from them, which is exactly what's going to happen. China will be taking America over. They will be colonizing us. So will Russia. Russia's going to get Alaska and the Arctic Circle to themselves so they can reign and rule over all the vast resources and minerals and oil and gas that's in the Arctic. So Russia can power itself into the next millennium because it'll have so many resources at its disposal. And China will have the lower 48 with all its resources and its vast tracts of farmland so it can feed all its hungry mouths. China only cares about China. You got to understand, they don't give a damn about no Great Reset. They don't care about none of that. China cares about China. Its factories and smog are going to keep putting out smog and producing things because China doesn't give a rat's ass about what the West has to say about carbon and carbon taxes. They don't care about none of it. The CCP only cares about the CCP and Xi Jinping. He is their little G god. That's all they care about. Russia, they don't care about the West or the World Economic Forum. They don't give a damn about them. And it's obvious. When you look at what's going on with both those countries, it's obvious. And India is a very tight ally with Russia. And India is on civil terms with China because Russia and China are like best buds. Even Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping call each other best friends. Best friends. So if the leaders are best friends and the nations are best friends, then what does that say? It says that they formed their own Eurasian bloc, their own separate system apart from the West, and that is what will evolve into the true beast system that's going to basically destroy the West with its stupid Great Reset, which is going to fail because there's going to be uprisings, and then the uprisings are going to get make everything destabilized and weak so that China and Russia can come in with almost no losses. So when you see everything going on, you have to look at everything through the lens of everything I've just told you tonight. You have to understand that that's where this is literally all headed to. This is all headed to basically Planet of the Apes type of stuff, but it'll be with humans. I mean, it's going to be crazy. People will be acting like apes. The most debased types of people are going to be on the loose, okay? They're going to be doing the worst types of things imaginable, and I'm going to show you all of that in my hypothetical documentary scenario on the Second American Civil Conflict, Syrian-style. I'm going to show you all of that, every detail of it. And a lot of it is going to be very dark as I get into it. And I don't want people to, squeamish people that are scared of reality. I don't want them to watch it if it's going to, scare them. I want people that are serious about survival to watch it so that they can understand fully what's coming and get motivated to get through it and navigate it. It's all about motivation. It's all about education. Because in educating you, I can show you what the intelligent people did to survive. Because you know what? I made it home from a war where I got blown up in 2 different vehicles. I got shot at. And guess what? I made it home alive. Yeah, I got hurt. I got hurt bad. I have a permanent back and neck injury. I got brain damage. Legally, I have brain damaged. I am brain damaged. I mean, I have seizures. I slur. I mean, I live with that every day. I have PTSD. But I deal with it. 14 years later now, and I deal with it. It took me a long time to get to where I'm at now, where I'm a lot more stable than I once was. And, it feels good to admit to that, but it's just good that, God has helped me on my journey, on my walk. And I hope each and every one of you are feeling the presence of God, feeling His Holy Spirit, all of it, because you know what? None of us are perfect, but you know what? If we want to walk with God, then God is going to get us through it, and He's going to put the right people in your lives to help you get through it. And I hope I'm one of those people. I hope to God, literally. I hope to Yeshua, Messiah, to the Holy Spirit. I hope I'm helping you all to get through what's coming. I am an educator, a teacher, nothing more, nothing less, because I'm an avid researcher. I consider myself, quasi-professional. Yeah, I don't have some fancy piece of paper that says that, that I'm this or I'm that. I don't need one. I know all I need to do is open up a book or look at documents or, compare notes, look at statistics, numbers, sheets, data, compare it, cross-reference it. And voila, guess what? You start to get answers, and you be able to put things together like a puzzle, You cannot just look at news stories, or you will be misled. You have to corroborate news stories with data and fact, 100% unadulterated fact, established fact, objective truth. Subjective truth is like when you see people with opinions, that they have their own truths. That's called subjective truth. Objective truth is based off of established fact that cannot be refuted or disputed. So, I am giving you guys established facts. That's what I base all my research on, is established facts. And I find those through research and analysis. And then I give you all, my answer, I do the best I can with everything I have. And I want to be the best I can be for you guys so that you guys can hopefully survive the psychopathy, the madness, the insanity that is coming to this world. In order to survive it, you need to know what it is. How can you survive something if you don't even know what it is you're facing? That's why I want to show you this stuff. So that you know what you're facing, and you know how to be a better planner and a better person for it, a more effective person for it. I want you people to be effective people. I want you people to be good planners. I don't want you people to be left in the dust, not knowing what to do when the first signs of a battle start to approach. I don't want you guys to panic. I don't want you guys to run in circles and get butchered. No, I want you guys to know what you're doing, to suit up, get your gear on, and get moving and evacuate. Get to a safe place. Get to where you cached away supplies and food and ammunition, everything you need. Because self-defense is everything. It's biblical. It's righteous. It is not the same thing as naked aggression. Don't ever listen to these false Jesuit liars or these FEMA pastors that try to get you to be just cattle to the slaughter. No, Christians should never just be slaughtered. You can be defending yourself, and guess what? If it was for your faith that you defended yourself against evil forces, guess what? You're going to heaven because you just got martyred for your faith, because you were defending your faith physically and spiritually. We are equally yoked to the physical and spiritual. God put us in a physical world. What does that mean? It means you have to do physical things sometimes, and God expects things of you. God expects things of you. He wanted David to take out Goliath, and David did that. David protected his Hebrew brethren from Goliath. He even grabbed 5 extra stones for Goliath's brothers. Guess what? Nehemiah rebuilt the Jerusalem wall, and he was armed in one hand, and he built with the other, as were his company of people that were also in his company helping him to rebuild that wall, the Jerusalem wall. Also, Ch1na in a lentil field. He defeated, utterly annihilated 600 Philistine aggressors that came and attacked him, just him. With a simple farming tool, he defended himself from 600 Philistine aggressors. And guess what? The disciples all carried swords. Do you think when they were on their journeys to spread the gospel that bandits didn't attack them, that wild animals didn't come after them? The disciples carried swords. One of them even chopped off an ear of a guard that was coming for Yeshua. Guess what? Yeshua said, if you don't have a sword, do what? Sell your cloak and buy a sword. And 2 swords is enough. What is that? A primary and a sidearm. Get you a good rifle and get you a good pistol. That's a modern day sword. It wasn't for spreading hummus back in the day or butter, like I said before. It was for defending yourself. Defending yourself. Defense is not the same as naked aggression. Now, naked aggressors, those are the ones that live by the sword, die by the sword is talking about. Naked aggressors, people that live by their weapon and do evil with their weapon, that do harm, that go and rob people, that murder people, that hurt people. Those are the ones that it's going to catch up to. Because one of those days, those murderers or those thieves is going to run into somebody that defends themselves from their evil and slays them. Being a dragon slayer. You might as well be, right? Because you're slaying evil. Evil cannot, you cannot defeat evil with a smile. Monograph always says revolution wasn't won with a smile. Well, you can't defeat evil with a smile or a hug. You have to stand up against it sometimes. Sometimes you have to stand your ground. And sometimes you have to put evil down into the dirt, take a dirt nap. So that's if you're attacked. Don't ever be an aggressor. I'm not advocating any of that, because you know what? Naked aggression is evil. It is a sin. But naked aggression and self-defense, it's night and day. Night and day. Self-defense is righteous, but naked aggression is a sin because it's prompted by sin in the first place. But self-defense is merely protecting you and the others around you. That is a righteous act of God. And you know what? I take a hard line on that. And anybody that tries to challenge me, you know what? I read the Bible in its proper context. I know how the things fit. So, I know enough to know that you either believe in the entire Bible or you don't believe in it at all. You can't cherry pick verses to make excuses for why you're a weakling or why you don't want to do the right thing. No. That is a sort of a Jesuit thing. These Jesuit false pastors that infiltrated the American church and subverted the American church, the organized churches, they're the ones that spread these false doctrines. They're the ones that try to twist Bible verses. They try to make Yeshua Messiah look like he's Barney the Purple Dinosaur or a hippie that lets people kick him around. It's disgusting. It makes me sick. It makes me livid to see that. Yeshua Messiah is none of that. He is a mighty warrior king. A mighty warrior king. And when he comes back, He's going to kick evil square in the ass. He's going to pick up the Antichrist and the false prophet and throw them alive in the lake of fire, alive. And he's going to open up his mouth and he's going to slay all the evil ones, all the marked. And their blood is going to rise as high as a horse's bridle. That's in Revelation. He ain't coming back to give hugs. He's coming back to destroy evil. So you know what? All praise and glory be to Yeshua Messiah, and he is a mighty warrior king, and I won't hear anything else of it, because that is what he is. He is my general. He is my God, you know. I mean, Yeshua Messiah is my personal savior. He is the Son of God. He is the Word made flesh. He is righteous, and he is the Son of God, and he is my general. I will follow him, you know. And self-defense is a righteous act. And I'm tired of seeing weak Christians, mamby-pamby, weakling Christians that call themselves Christians. I don't claim them. I do not claim them because I don't feel that they're doing the right thing. I feel that they've been subverted and that they're not following the Bible the correct way. But again, that's because I take a hard line on certain things. You know, I mean, we all have our own powerful convictions and faith. You know, I mean, it's just, you know, we're all made according to how God wanted us to be. So, you know what, I'm serving God in the best capacity that I know how to, as a man, as a former soldier, and I hope you all are doing the same in your own capacities, how you know how to do, as the best person you can be. And I hope you all will be able to navigate these things and do righteous self-defense and defend other people that are in danger, because that's the godly, correct thing to do, especially if you're an able-bodied man. You know, I just get tired of seeing the you know, people that play church all the time. I just get tired of it. You know, I want to see real Christians that really understand the Bible, that really know about self-defense, that really know about prepping. I want to see those types of people. Because you know what? That's my crowd. That's my people. You know, I want to defend other people because that's my abilities, my God-given abilities is as a soldier. You know, I'm a soldier. That was my trade, and I want to be able to defend other people as a soldier for God. So, you know what? I thank you all for coming with me. I know this was a bit lengthy, but I had a lot to say because there's a lot of narratives out there that need to be put into their proper perspective, because a lot of logistics and things have to go into certain things to even make them possible. That's one thing. I told you about the rival syndicates and their plans being separate plans. I've told you about all of that. You have to look at news because news is propaganda. You have to understand that. Smith-Mundt is not in effect. So you're getting full propaganda when you get the news. And all these alternative people that report news stories, I hope to God, and I mean this literally. I'm not saying this as to be mean-spirited. I mean this in the real literal way. I hope to God they're vouching vouching for their information or being able to corroborate it with real data, because a lot of these news stories are a bunch of hype. It's a bunch of hype and it's a bunch of nonsense. And you have to be able to validate or dismiss news stories based on established objective truth and fact. So again, I thank you all for coming. I love you all. I hope you all enjoyed this as much as I did. I love being able to talk to you all and tell you all about things that I know. And, you know, there's things that I don't know that I just won't ever speak on because I'm not qualified to speak on. I only speak on things I'm qualified to speak on. And this is my corner of the world in my time and place. And I thank you all for being here with me, and I feel blessed that you all came. So I love you all very much. Please come back, and I enjoyed having each and every one of you. Be blessed.